coming out tonight. It's pretty cold out there. So we're really happy to see all of you here. We're here to start a conversation with you and other people that might be interested in this topic. And our baby is still pretty new, so we're just kind of, seeing what she looks like, what could happen. But that's why we're here tonight, so I appreciate you coming out to join us. We thought we'd start with a bit of an intention and come on in, an intention and a little bit of a ceremony, or whatever we call that. What is it?
Meditation.
A bit of a meditation, to do that. Call in help, for the baby to get nourished. You want to start?
Sure. Pass it on to you.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. We'll do intros in a second. My name's Daniel. And, let's start with a brief meditation to ground and to let go of drive and all the conversations before here. And then we'll...
Speak a little louder.
Then we will share what we have to share and really want to hear from you all as well. So if you'd like to soften your gaze or close your eyes, and taking a moment to connect with your breath, noticing the quality of your breathing and then the depth and the energy that is with your breath. Could be excitement or curiosity. Choosing to breathe just a little deeper in the belly than we were before. Imagining with every exhale letting go of the day and the drive over here. And letting go of the conversations you were having. Allowing yourself to fully arrive in the space. Imagine breathing all the way down to your root, feeling this floor and this earth beneath us, supporting us as we step into these big ideas. Acknowledging and that we will be speaking of extended state DMT expeditions and research and what all of that entails. Finding that deeper space inside yourself, completing this statement, I am here tonight to What brought you here? What interested you or inspired you? And taking a breath with that, allowing that image or word, statement to be with you.
Calling in support from every direction and every dimension. The unseen as well as the seen. This project is being birthed from an intention just to follow this thread. And so for tonight, we'll be holding that thread together and letting it, seeing where it goes. Come in, come in, come in. There's room up in the front.
And bringing it back to your breath, bringing this image back with you into the space, into the conversation. Bringing your own intentions and honoring the intentions of speaking to these expeditions this evening. Feeling grounded and supported, safe. allowing yourself to gently return to the shared space of the room, staying connected and in contact with your breath, allowing your eyes to open when you feel ready, welcoming new members coming in.
Welcome.
This is great. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. This is really
Fun.
quite a privilege and a lot of fun to speak on these ideas. I mean, we wouldn't be doing it without you all here. So, I'd like to thank Nate for showing up to film. So I just wanted to acknowledge that we are filming this event. It will be on YouTube on our Psychedelic Shine page at some point as part of our series on this work. And I'd like to acknowledge Allison for coming and helping out. Allison's my wife, and she's the co-director of Medicinal Mindfulness. Everybody can hear me okay? All right, just checking.
Julian, would you get the door? Thank you. Sure. Have folks come in, that'd be great. Hi. So you heard please?
Yeah.
You want to be first?
Sure. So, my name is Daniel McQueen. I'm the co-director of Medicinal Mindfulness. And before we begin, we'd just like to all acknowledge the privilege that we have from being able to speak openly about this work and in this way, and also the privilege that I have in having the job that I have. I'm a psychedelic facilitator. That's what I do professionally. That's my day job. And we've been facilitating psychedelic experiences using cannabis sativa since it became legal in 2014 in Colorado. I also facilitate breathwork groups with live music, and we have a program called Psychedelic Sitter School, where I teach people how to hold space for their friends and allies, and then also initiate the journey becoming guides for others. I have a background in psychotherapy. Carla was one of my professors at Naropa. I have a master's in transpersonal counseling, and so that's a primary orientation of our program. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the program, but I want to give Carla an opportunity to introduce herself as well, and what your job is as part of this program.
Sure. I'm Carla Clements. I'm a professor here at Naropa, have been for 15 years. They finally got someone else to be the chair, so that allowed me to have more free time to think about more interesting things. And that's sort of, what's coming in. Let's see, I was also really lucky to be the independent rater for the MAPS Phase 2 project. Come on in. There's some room up front if you'd like to come on up. MAPS Phase 2 project with MDMA that was done the last 3 years here in Boulder. Or at least we have 30 of the subjects of the 100 that were being investigated over the past 3 years. And I really learned a lot being part of that process. And let's see, my connection with psychedelics is a long one. I started when I was a kid, like I bet you some of you, and just experiencing and experimenting, and found it pretty darn transformational. And with Daniel, I want to speak to the amazing privilege this feels like. All the people that have come before and done wonderful work, we get to be on the precipice of maybe something new, something that would actually be quite profound. So we're really excited to share that with you tonight and let you know what we're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm going to pass this out. This is just an info sheet. I think we have enough copies, but we can make more if we need them. Start one over here and one over here. And this is just so you have some dates and some notes. Before I begin with the intro, I was just curious, what were some of the images or words that came up for you with your intention? I'm here tonight to, what was that for you? What came up? We want to mold this to your interests, I guess, not just share what we have to share.
I had learn, grow, evolve.
Nice.
And grow, evolve, yeah. Who else?
Pushing the human endeavor.
What's that?
Pushing the human endeavor forward.
Pushing the human endeavor forward, yeah. Yeah, that's, yeah. I'm definitely inspired by that idea as well. Anybody else? Yeah.
Human avenue and education to follow possible career.
So interested in like being a guide yourself or somehow related to
I'm still finding
psychedelics?
it. I do body work, but I'm looking at how to bridge the medicine with the psyche and the
Yeah.
Explore, learn, and teach.
Mm-hmm.
Studying to be a shaman myself. Went to the jungle last year. Anything, information I could get on any of this to help with that journey.
Yeah, right on.
Go for it.
Who else has a professional interest in this work?
I want to be a psychonaut.
You want to be a psychonaut? Who wants to be an extended state DMT psychonaut? Come on, don't be shy.
You investigate, my mind still works.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm very interested in obviously pushing the boundaries of human experience as far as possible, but at the same time in language, especially with other consciousness or entities that people experience on DMT, as well as the use of psychedelics in combination with the advances that we make in technology,
Yeah.
and how as humans and technology become more of a hybrid,
Yeah.
how psychedelics, what kind of part psychedelics may play.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the specifics that really intrigued me about this particular idea, because DMT is like designed for it, and a fusion with technology. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm here in Boulder because Naropa is having the end of life care conference. It's going on starting tonight. And so this just popped up on my phone, I'm glad to say. So I'm interested in therapeutic applications.
Therapeutic
I
applications.
bet a lot of people in here are.
Yeah,
me too. Me too.
All right, so let's
Welcome.
make sure we talk about therapeutic applications for sure. Yeah.
I just wanted to add, I'm a neuroscience student. I drove up from Denver, and so like with the,
Yeah, right on.
I'm really interested in like addiction neuroscience and the application this might have.
I like the
Yeah.
ditto that one.
Uh-huh. Good. I like that.
Which part of it? You're a neuroscientist or?
I was
Interested in
just now
addiction.
starting my journey towards it, and
Uh-huh.
I was practicing in addiction treatments before this.
Oh, great.
Mhm. Nice.
Great.
I'm interested in learning how to help people prepare and also integrate after management.
Big interests of mine as well. Thanks.
Yeah, safety is our biggest question, and how to manage it appropriately. That's our biggest, not a concern, but our biggest desire to keep everybody safe in this. Yeah.
I want to hold a virtual space for inexperienced cannabis users.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Like with virtual, yeah, we've been looking at that too. Yeah, so there's virtual reality is starting to seg into psychedelics and technology, and we're playing with the medical side of technology of coming together with psychedelics too. I think it'd be kind of overkill to put a VR, with a DMT experience. I don't think you need it, right? You're already there.
Overkill.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. And then just a curiosity, who's never heard of Medicinal Mindfulness or a program or DMTx and student state? Everybody? Okay, some of us are new. So we have a whole series on YouTube. We have a Shine, that's called Psychedelic Shine YouTube page. And we have a lot of presentations on that. So a lot of the work that I will be speaking about tonight will be building on previous conversations. There's also presentations with Dr. Strassman and Dr. McKenna, Dennis McKenna, and Dr. Andrew Gallimore up there, who specifically talks about the extended state DMT research idea. I want to tell you a little bit about the DMT work, but I want to create a foundation of speaking it in the context of medicinal mindfulness. And so medicinal mindfulness came out of my practices at Naropa. It's the name mindfulness, and one of our primary orientations is.
Come on in. There's plenty of room up here. Come on in.
Yeah, we've got plenty of space up here. There's still some
Yeah.
spots available.
It might not be too soft, but at least you have a little room. Welcome.
Hello.
Welcome. Come on in.
Yeah, we saw like 600 people were interested in this on Facebook and 100 going, so we were hoping we had a big enough room. But it looks like we're doing really well. Well, just to name a few primary orientations of medicinal mindfulness that are already attempting to push the conversation a little more forward, and that's this idea of setting and skill, creating a solid foundation for psychedelic medicine experiences. That set and setting is something that we all speak about in the psychedelic community, right? But if we don't incorporate agency and ourself in that, then we become more of a passenger on the psychedelic experience. One of the things I really got deep in my bones at Naropa going through this program was the importance of mindfulness skills in psychedelic experiences, how to navigate, how to engage them, how to safely feel really big emotions, right? And how to surrender and let go in really profound experiences, how to stay focused, and not just keep flipping the channel, right? So, and it's in the name, medicinal mindfulness, this skill set and idea. And everything about the program that we're creating with DMT, extended state DMT research, is an opportunity to share skill sets with the psychedelic community in a way that's really inspiring, right? And that we can all take some medicine and have a good time, but somehow this idea of extended state DMT ups the ante a little bit, and people start paying attention. It's like, oh, what would I do to prepare for something like that? I don't really know. Let me sit with that. I've been thinking about that question for a long time now. The other primary orientation is a multi-paradigm approach based on many sacred traditions. Primarily, in my path, it came from like Native American medicine wheel traditions, with the 4 primary directions representing aspects of self, ways of being, and also orientations to medicine work. Are there any copies, extra copies, for anybody that didn't get any that were new? Raise your hand if you'd like a copy. Just so
It looks like about 20 more. I'll go make some.
it's in.
I'm gonna run out and go make some.
Oh, can Allison get to it? Or?
She doesn't know my capacity. I can do it.
Let's get you guys some.
Let me go get a few more. I'll be right back. You carry on.
Yeah. So I'm gonna just draw this because I might come back to it. So the 4 primary paradigms we work out of are science, psychology, creativity, and spirituality. And if you think about how the psychedelic medicines are used intentionally, they're in one of these 4 areas. Scientific research and creative problem solving. LSD microdosing would be an example of that. Spirituality is obvious. Aya communities, Native American church communities, and people who are using medicines individually to induce spiritual states and contact with something beyond us. Creativity right, is pretty obvious. Art, music, self-expression, right, authentic self-expression. And then psychology, psychedelic medicines that are being used for treatment for clinical concerns, right? MDMA for PTSD, peyote for addiction, right? It's a mescaline for addiction, ibogaine for addiction, things like that. Johns Hopkins end-of-life anxiety with psilocybin. Like the list is getting pretty long at this point. So even though we're talking about a scientific endeavor tonight, and that's kind of a primary orientation of actually doing research with the psychedelic, we want to acknowledge that we're coming from a more holistic orientation, and that it kind of changes the image a little bit. It's not straight neuroscience or like a reductionist, materialistic science that we're playing with. And in a DMT state, the phenomenon itself, the experience itself, is often described with spiritual or religious connotations. And also, Dr. Strassman points out again and again that everybody feels that it's more real than real, right? So on an individual level, like somebody experiencing DMT is having an experience that feels more real than real. And if we were to discount and acknowledge, just try to characterize those as inner hallucinations, then it might not be the safest container for a psychonaut to fully process their experience, right? And so in this research, I'll just go a little deeper since it's on my mind. With this research proposal, extended state DMT research proposal, we want to bring in all of these areas. What that looks like is, it's got to be compliant with IRBs and FDA approval process and appropriate scientific foundations around safety and scientific method, right? And the spiritual side of it, we're acknowledging the possibility that this inner experience is real in some way. And when I say acknowledge the possibility, I'm not saying it's, oh my God, look what's happening. This is far out, and we should keep it as a truth, right? But it's acknowledging that people are having deeply and profoundly spiritual, impactful, life-changing experiences, and providing the support for that in some way. Creativity is really showing up. I mean, this whole thing is a creative process, right? But we're bringing it out and attempting to engage the community as much as we can to bring accessibility to our work and also engagement, community engagement. And to me, extended state DMT brings up like science fiction elements, right? And movies and books that kind of talk about alternative realities and other dimensions and things. And so there's an incredible creative science fiction, fantasy element that we can play with and support and imagine together. And through imagination, we can co-create something like this. And then in the study, the psychology really shows up in where Carla is really coming in as an assessment person, doing pre and post assessments to determine what impact, if any, psychologically speaking, the experiences had with individuals. And then also being really aware of the need to provide maybe an extended period of integration time for the psychonauts after these experiences, So we're approaching this from a holistic perspective and also a healthy systems perspective, and that is we want to create mechanisms to putting in place mechanisms for team dialogue, safety for the sitters, safety for the facilitators. I don't know if anybody noticed, but the world's a little on edge right now. There's a lot of energy around this work, and so creating a container that acknowledges differences of opinion and diversity, and so that we can stay engaged in this for as long as we possibly can. There's a lot of talk. There's just, I think, one more piece I'd like to share, if that's okay. And then that I'm engaging this as part of my own process. I don't know, it could be like a spiritual process, healing process, awakening process, whatever you want to call it. I've been following these threads and wanting to been co-creating psychedelic programs for many years now. And one of the things I realized is that when you're following a thread, a psychedelic thread, you often don't get the full picture, of how to do something before you jump in. But that if you keep taking steps towards it, you will be met by something that will support you in this journey. This isn't an uncommon experience for many people in our community, right? To be inspired by an idea from a medicine experience and then do our best to live into it. And I felt like I had already landed somewhere that was really amazing, and that is this being my job to facilitate psychedelic experiences with cannabis. And but it felt like it was getting to a space of feeling very grounded in it, and being a psychedelic medicine person, that wasn't enough. There's right, we always have this, what's the next thing we can do? What's the, what can we step into, live into? And, I'm reaching a certain age. Allison and I have 2 young children now, and, wanting some stability. So I started to think, well, what's the biggest vision that we could create? What could keep me interested for the rest of my life? And this is what appeared. I had just learned about the study from Rick Strassman. He had emailed a group of people announcing the extended state study with the model, and Dr. McKenna was coming for another psychedelic shine. Did anybody see that at Golden Theater? And so I really had to start thinking, what's a vision that could not only inspire me, but a community of people to live into for a generation or 2 or more, right? What would take DMT or the psychedelic community to the next level, right? If Dr. Strassman's work with DMT initiated all of this, right? The whole psychedelic renaissance, right? What can we co-create together that might inspire something equally big, And so that's like a really grand vision. And so what do? We bring it into thought and idea, and what's the next step? And over a series of steps after steps after steps, we really landed in this space where it's becoming not just an idea, but like a team is gathering for this. And we're bringing together the people that could actually make it happen. So I'd like to play with these ideas of a metaphor of an expedition journey, but we're not going on an expedition in the real world. There might be some traveling involved or something like that, but the real expedition is into what would it look like to co-create a future possibility where DMT research is funded and supported and ongoing, not just for a small community of people, right? Because it's so particular, and the numbers are so small of who can participate in the research. How can we develop something that can grow over the years into something that is really deeply inspiring for myself and the community of others? And what would it look like to speak to the psychedelic community about an idea that we don't have to couch or nest in ideas that are appropriate or feel safe for the mainstream, right? What would a program look like that was specifically for us, for people like us? I support the movement towards bringing psychedelics more and more into the mainstream. I think they could really do a lot of help and benefit people, but that's not really all the potential that they have to help heal clinical concerns, or be useful in that way. So we're speaking from these orientations, transpersonal orientation that includes the possibility that there's more real than just here. And we can all talk about that and what we think about that. We're coming from a healthy systems perspective, but we're also engaging it in speaking in a way that this is the grand vision, and here's a path that we can take to co-create it together. So I'm really super stoked about the idea. And so let's maybe talk about DMT and explain DMT real quick so we all have an idea of that. Would y'all like to have a little orientation around DMT? All right. So what is DMT? What is DMT? Dimethyltryptamine. It's the most profound psychedelic experience that we can have as human beings. Generally speaking, the experience itself is like being transported to another reality that appears higher dimensional, more complex than this reality, hyper visual and real, sometimes energetic or cartoon-like in appearing, or even, again, more real than real, if that makes sense. And one of the primary characteristics is this idea of regular interactions with beings, entities that feel objectively different than us. And we can talk about the phenomenology if you'd like, whether or not that's actually happening or not, I don't know. But the experience itself feels like, oh, wow, this is amazing. Who are you? I'd like to get to know you. And just as you start getting your feet a little oriented to this new reality, start to look around, you're quickly pulled back out of the experience, and you return to normal consciousness. It's usually either injected or smoked, and ingested, it's usually in the form of ayahuasca or ayahuasca analogs with an MAOI, which helps you absorb it, which goes for the longer experience with ingesting. So let's see if I can model this. I've never really tried to do this. So this is time. This is dose and blood system, right? And you jump up pretty quick. This is the peak area. And you come back down. And this period is about 5 to 7 minutes. And this is with Strassman's. This is based on Strassman's original research. He actually timed it when people became lucid enough, like when people could hear him again, and become and could say something, right? But there's a period.
Or at least nod.
Yeah, or nod. Yeah. Like in this area, they're not feeling the blood pressure cuffs. They're not there. They're not here. This is about 100. I think. Is it? I don't know how to do this. Nanograms per milliliter. This peak right here. Kind of. This is the goal. Is this 100? And there are ways to extend DMT without what we're doing. I'll explain what we're doing in a second. You can smoke it with an MAOI like Syrian rue, like freebase Syrian rue. People talk about that. You can take it when you're peaking on acid. It'll extend your trip out. Things like that. But you're talking maybe 10 to 15 minutes in the peak. When you're talking about pure DMT at this level. Now ayahuasca can take you 6 hours or more, right? But the levels, according to Dr. Gallimore, are about right here in the blood, the DMT in the blood. It's kind of wavy, So we're talking about extending a DMT state at this level for extended periods of time. I don't know if we know how long we can do it yet. how we would do that is Dr. Gallimore came up with this equation based on pharmacokinetics and absorption rates. DMT, because it's such a quick onset and a quick comeback, it doesn't have a high tolerance, right? And so your body absorbs it and processes it really quick. So it's a great candidate to put through a machine called a targeted infusion pump. And this is a similar machine that people put anesthesia in, to keep somebody under in surgery. And it's also now being used for ketamine-assisted psychotherapies and ketamine treatments for depression and things. So the technology is already there. But the research will be attempting to find the covariates and working with the psychonauts so that we could theoretically extend this out, at some point.
Forever.
How long can you be out? Before, do the psychonauts wear diapers? Because it's not a space you can get up and go to the bathroom in, right? So there might be some physical limits on one end of the equation once we figured it all out. But there's two threads of research that we're kind of looking at, and one is this isn't my first choice, but I'll name it because it relates to why we will do the second choice if we can. The first choice is to give a whole bunch of people DMT, men, women, different body types, different sizes, do genetic testing, and figure out all the factors that create a maintenance dose. The question is, what's the flow rate to keep somebody safely in this space? What's the flow rate of DMT in the body? So that's one way we can do it. The other way we can do it is we do it in real time. We'll talk about maybe the room if y'all like. Somebody's set up for the DMT experience. They've got an IV in their arm. The doctor is behind them, and they say, okay, we're going to bump it up. And then see if we can keep it stable right there, right? The person's still here, but they're also still in the altered state. And they can report, it seems to be stabilized, or no, it's actually still increasing. That means the flow rate is still not level, right? And then the goal will be, okay, are we ready? We're going to bump you up again. And then we'll do that for a little bit, bump them back down. Okay, what was that like? And are we ready to go again, bump them back in? And the question is the line has to be like this for it to be safe. If it constantly is going up, like up here to these levels, that's not a fun experience. Dr. Strassman's original research was figuring out the right dosage for lucid experiences, but at these, if it continues to just increase, you get into realms where everything is disjointed, everything's fragmented, you can't remember any of it, it's just overwhelming. So that's the goal, the long-term goal of the research, is to extended state DMT. And since there was a conversation or question around therapeutic applications, there's sub-peak doses. So here's the bottom of the peak. There's sub-peak doses that theoretically you could keep somebody in for a full psychotherapy session or something like that. Not a full dose where they're gone, but they're obviously very altered. But conversations can happen and things. I'm really curious to see if we can sustain those doses as well. But theoretically, long-term goal, we should be able to develop some sort of mechanism that you could program program the up, right? How steep do you want your intake? You want to go up slowly, like this, or you can just you're ready to go in it, rocket ship. You can program that. You can program the duration. How long do you want to be in the experience? And you can program the intensity. At what level do you want to be in that experience? And so this is what the research is attempting to suss out, the basic questions, how to do it. It's never, so there have been people who have done similar things with pump infusion technology with DMT, but they've never put the pharmacokinetic equation that Dr. Gallimore has developed with this idea of finding so it's either called extended state or stable state DMT, which is just you're in it. Right? Anybody have any questions so far? It's kind of like looping around a little bit.
Yeah, this is going to show my ignorance. I've never done DMT before. But I'm just curious if you could speak a little bit more as to why we would want to extend the duration of the experience.
Yeah. Who would like to answer that? Yeah.
Well, it's, in my opinion, because DMT is so short, it's like you only get a little bit of the download, and you'd want to extend it so that you can get more information from the realm that you're in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so often there's a quality of receiving information or understanding from a source that's greater than us. So if you can imagine being able to have a real sit-down conversation instead of a, hey, how are you? Who are you? What's going on? And then back out of it, or just like shock that you find yourself like wherever you're at. You can reorient. My hope is that somehow the DMT experience maybe becomes more manageable, maybe not so fast. Once you reorient, you're like, okay, I'm here now. What can I do? And so, some of these initial studies, we'll be doing phenomenological surveys and things. What's the territory like? What's the terrain tell us? Can we categorize these entities in a meaningful way that provides something, right? Yeah.
So is anyone doing extended DMT sessions or experiences now?
No.
Okay.
No, this is a new thing. There are people who maybe on the underground are using morphine drip buttons and things to kind of go in and out of the DMT experience. There was one study that used a pump, infusion pump, but not with the pharmacokinetic model that Gallimore suggested. And there's also a research program in London at the Imperial College of London, did I get that right? And they're doing MRI scans, I think, or some sort of brain imaging scans with DMT. But right now, nobody's doing this particular one. It's just another thing that intrigued me. It's like, what do we not know about psychedelics, right? We know MDMA can heal trauma, right? Even though it's still going through the proposal process, right, and the approval process. We know these medicines are good in a lot of things. What do we not know? And so that was something that I was curious about. Yeah. What else? Any other questions or thoughts?
So I also really don't know much about it. So what do we know about the side effects in terms of health? Like what happens to a brain and things like that? Do you keep people long, late,
Yeah, that's a really good question. We don't have any direct evidence because that's maybe the closest. What are the possible side effects of being in an extended state DMT? It's a question that we get regularly. Well, there's a couple of things we want to put that into a larger conversation around selecting people in the selection process, and that we can assess for things that might turn out to be problematic in the experience, or somebody who might be like already predisposed to certain mental health disorders and things. We might not want to start with somebody who that might have some contraindications like that. And so we would be starting with very healthy human beings, skilled meditators and psychonauts, and physically and psychologically healthy to some degree. So that should reduce the chances of bad experiences happening. The biggest areas that I could imagine, and what I've seen, so some people maybe smoke a lot of DMT and do it in a maybe unintegrated way, and they can come off sometimes as really amped up, ungrounded, Sometimes you can even pop into episodes of mania or psychosis, paranoia. What if you go into an experience and it's like Matrix-like, and it's more real than real? These are things we have to really, create a container around. And so the only correlation I know right now are people who've taken a whole bunch of DMT, but they're often doing them in uncontained environments and without support or integration or safety. So this would be very radically different than those experiences. Yeah, please.
Although I think that's an excellent question about, there's a lot of data that we can mine around people who have experienced it, maybe lots of times. And we can begin looking at, some information that they could share with us and start collecting some of that data, because not a lot has actually been done. So there's really nothing definitive known, except it's one of the drugs that has very few apparent side effects at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Now with exploration we may find more, but you can go into a DMT state, come back down, and actually not even really interrupt your day. Although it's a peak experience to be there. So it does interrupt your psyche, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess on that note, recognizing the integration on the other side,
Yes.
tapping into the psyche in such a way.
Yes.
And I'm curious, I know Santa used to have this emergency network.
Yes.
Where it was basically retrieving as people and make sense of their paranormal experiences instead of making it pathological, which I don't know where things are at, and I'm just curious if there's any modern network. I don't even know if the book's even in print.
Yeah. I think the Spiritual Emergence Network is still going in California. It's not very big, but I think they still have a phone number you can call. There are a lot so we're no longer in an arena where it's just a few players doing international, programs. Now there's a lot of grassroots, local, regional groups that are popping up. And one of the big things now, we were about 4 years ahead of the curve, and so it didn't quite take off when we were starting to do it. But we're coming back to it now that it's popping more, is integration circles, and so that's no longer you have to call a hotline, but you can sometimes get join an integration circle. Sometimes they're free, facilitated by a psychedelic oriented therapist.
That's rooted like in your work, or is that?
There's a lot. And then there's the psychedelic club, so popping up in all over the country, and a lot of students are part of that. We started in the Naropa Alliance for Psychedelic Studies, so those are like even just a group where you go, info group. A lot of processing can happen in those circles.
We're doing our best to send therapists out there who can absolutely help.
Yeah, because it's taking information and creating something with it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, let's do a couple more questions and then we'll keep going. Yeah.
I just wanted to speak to the toxicology. As far as I know, DMT is an endogenous molecule, so it's actually produced in your body.
Yeah.
And that it's metabolized at such a rate that I don't believe you could overdose on
I don't
DMT.
think so either. I think it would just be an overwhelming experience.
Right.
And the great thing about this study is that if there's a crisis, just turn it off, and then the person just starts to immediately come down. It's way different than any other psychedelic.
What I was just going to say, I don't know if you know more about this, but I haven't found any solid research to back this, but that the idea that our dream state is in fact produced through the release of DMT organically.
Yeah.
But I don't know if,
Those are really good theories, and right now it's theoretical, but it's a good idea. It's really good. Yeah, so Rick Strassman's original study, that started the movement was a safety study. It was just a safety study, and he showed, clearly showed that it was safe to take. It's just the question is how far, I think ethically we don't want to say, okay, now you're going to do a 6-hour DMT trip. You ready? We're gonna work up to that for safety reasons. Let's do one more and then.
Yeah, I'm curious if you could speak to the different forms of the DMT. I know there's the 5-MeO and there's
Mhm.
sort of more an extracted version from plants.
Yeah, sure. 5-MeO-DMT is another substance that we wouldn't be studying in this. It's a very different experience. And theoretically, though, it could be extended like NN-DMT. I think there's safety protocols that have to be even higher for 5-MeO-DMT.
That's for sure.
Not so DMT can be extracted from plants. Mimosa hostilis is one of the primary ones, and it can also be synthesized, and so we're going to have a lot of constraints about where we get the DMT, and it also has to be exceptionally pure. It would be a water-soluble solution so it can go through the pump and be, not have any concerns there. So I don't know if we would be able to have it extracted from plants. I'd be curious to do that though. If we did the study in the States, it'd have to be synthesized and pure from a Schedule 1 licensed organic chemist. And Schedule 1 means that DMT is a very restricted substance, right, and very illegal, except that we do produce it in our bodies, right? And so that would be one area that we're looking at. Another area that we would be looking at is doing a program in another country where DMT is legal because of religious means. We'll talk a little bit about that. But we would still want to make sure it was like 99.99, I don't know how many nines there we want, pure in DMT. So it's a little different than the toad that people have been talking about. That's a 5-MeO DMT experience.
Dr. Octavio.
Yeah, we won't talk about him. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I kind of formulated one. So you actually have experiments, or you just done a theory?
Good question.
We
Are you experimenting? Do you have a
we're not experimenting yet.
Okay.
So one of the things.
Why I ask, because you said the medicine that you know about is not extracted out of the plant.
The medicine that we could get in the States.
The DMT that you were actually talking about is not extracted out of the plant.
I don't think there would be some constraints to extract it from a plant for something like this, and I don't know the answer to that yet. But if we could get pure DMT from a plant, I'd rather have that than a synthesized version.
But it does
personally.
come from the plant anyways. It's just the chemical process that gets it to the state that we can actually...
It can be either extracted straight from a plant, you don't have to do anything to it, it's in DMT, or you can build it molecularly.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yep.
I was just curious because the word integration came up several times, and open, like the query, will the extended state be only by measuring the dosage, or are you considering applying MAO inhibitors? Because I've found that the quality to have accessibility to the information and to integrate it into the experience outside of anything.
The MAO helps.
Yeah, it really helps. It softens it and it makes it more digestible, so to speak. So I was wondering if that's being considered, maybe not even for this round, but going forward.
This would be pure DMT without any MAOIs, because there might be physiological, like you were describing, psychological effects of the MAOI that would inhibit us from understanding what the pure experience of DMT would be like. So yeah, we don't know what, the MAOI naturally extends the DMT trip. We're just extending it, through technology as opposed. So it might be that we can mimic what MAOI would do with the flow rate or something. I don't know. So, got lots of questions. Yeah.
So in terms of time, I'm wondering how much more we want to actually say, or if we want to just do
Keep going with the questions. Yeah, I want to say a little bit more. Can we talk a little bit more about?
We'll get back to your questions. I just want to make sure there's time.
Did you want to talk about the assessments, or do you want me to go to the next thing?
Yeah, I think they might be able to imagine this. My fantasy is to start with interviews and focus groups and that kind of gathering of information data mining from the culture that already exists of people who are using this medicine regularly, or at least have done so a few times. And also just, ask you, what do you think? How should we do this? What is the best way to approach the question of, like, how can we make sure that when you come back you could speak to us about what happened there? Which I think is a pretty important question. It can be a very profound experience, but we need articulatable outcomes in some way too, just for fun. So in designing the process of the research, we'll have, some pre-research questions. I have to read everything on the IRB over the break to make sure that I don't run afoul of the IRB processes. So I was going to do a little survey tonight, and then I decided, I better not. Whatever I learn from you, I want to be able to use in the actual description of the research. And so if we gather data before we have that done, we wouldn't be able to. Does that make sense? It's just a law. So that's the idea. Some interviews, some focus groups, so using people like you to help us really get an idea of what we want to do. And then Daniel, Allison have tons of information already on setting, how to design the experience, some sitter trainings that I think we'll definitely be incorporating, and then looking at, now what do people need for that integration? What do they need after the fact? So looking at a lot of different pieces of this, and again, is it just a peak experience, and do we just hold that in our own mental health and happiness places and let it really inform and expand our life in a good way? Or are there actually other things that it's good for too? Like, could we really actually, in a transpersonal way, connect with another reality? Which, of course, is a huge desire of mine, should that be possible. So, we're going to look at all that. But it's got to go kind of slow here at the first part. So that's assessment. It's, how we might get there. And I may be calling on many of you to interview and help me gather and mine that data. Hope you will.